Fear creeps in quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow that lingers in the corners of your mind before you even realize it is there. It does not announce itself with alarms or bright lights. It whispers, soft and insistent, planting seeds of doubt that grow unnoticed until they root themselves in every decision you make. At first, you tell yourself you are rational, that you are disciplined, that your experience and knowledge are shields against the irrational. You call it caution, prudence, reason. But that is the first lie. Fear does not look like fear, and prudence does not always feel prudent. You hesitate before pulling the trigger, second-guess a plan that was clearly mapped, feel a tightening in your chest that you dismiss as anticipation, and in those subtle pauses, fear asserts its dominion over your mind. Traders think they are in control when they read charts and analyze data, yet the market is indifferent. The only force that punishes them is the distortion within their own perception. Your gaze drifts to the numbers, to the candle formations, to the lines drawn with care and intent, yet your hand falters, your finger hovers, your breath catches. That is the silent intruder at work. You are not seeing the market. You are seeing it through a lens tainted by anxiety, by instinct, by primitive survival mechanisms that were never designed to handle abstract numbers or electronic signals. And yet, you cannot ignore it because fear is chemical. It courses through your body, it flares in your chest, it tightens your stomach, it makes your heart beat a rhythm of uncertainty. You might think this is weakness, a flaw in your temperament, but it is universal. Every trader has faced this moment. The shadow that turns opportunity into hesitation, insight into indecision, clarity into confusion. Some fail and never recognize it. Others, rare few, notice, confront, and learn to navigate. Most will never even name it. It is easy to blame the market, easy to say that conditions were volatile, unpredictable, manipulated, unfair. That is what the mind does when it is defending itself. But the truth is more subtle, more personal, more intimate. The failure occurs long before the trade, in the seconds of doubt, in the hesitation that never leaves the body. You try to rationalize it, telling yourself this pause is strategic, a moment to reassess. But every rationalization is layered atop an instinctive reaction that is neither rational nor strategic. Fear does not reason, it reacts. It is instantaneous, primal, relentless, and yet it is invisible to those who do not observe carefully. You might review your trades later, write notes, replay the charts, thinking you understand why you lost, why you hesitated, why you acted against your own plan. And you are partially correct. The charts tell a story, the numbers give data, the signals explain timing. But the charts do not feel the pounding of your heart, the tightness of your gut, the cold sweat of anticipation that no spreadsheet can capture. They do not speak to the part of you that fears making the wrong choice more than it desires making the right one. The silent intruder is subtle, pervasive, and insidious because it is intertwined with your sense of self. It preys on perfectionism, it amplifies uncertainty, it punishes inaction as loudly as action. You will feel moments of clarity, fleeting glimpses of composure where you act decisively, confidently, as if fear has no hold. And in those moments, you taste mastery, if only briefly. But mastery is fragile. It requires constant observation, self-awareness, and courage to face the shadow again and again, without flinching, without justifying, without blaming. Most traders mistake the absence of fear for skill, yet the absence is temporary and illusionary. The truly skilled recognize it, name it, and operate in spite of it. You are wrong every time you confuse hesitation with prudence, worry with strategy, avoidance with analysis. That is the hook. The mind is more dangerous than the market itself. Traders lose not because of trends, not because of volatility, not because of external events. They lose because they fail to see fear for what it is, to measure it, to account for it, to step outside themselves long enough to act intentionally. And yet, fear is also the doorway to understanding. If you observe it, track it, confront it, it teaches you about yourself, about your triggers, about the limits of your rationality. The chest tightens, the hands shake, the heart races, and each of these reactions carries a lesson. The lesson is not to eliminate the response, it is to integrate it into your decisions. When you can see the shadow for what it is, acknowledge it without surrendering. You begin the journey toward clarity. This is the first threshold that every trader must cross. to recognize that hesitation is not mere caution, that doubt is not insight, that fear is not weakness. It is information, raw and unfiltered, and the failure to process it is the source of most mistakes. You will replay this moment countless times in your mind, analyzing, wondering, wishing you had acted differently. But the key is to observe the pattern, to trace it back to the seconds where instinct overtook strategy, where emotion overruled reason. Here lies the silent intruder, always present, always subtle, always waiting for the next hesitation, the next flicker of uncertainty, the next trade, the next opportunity, the next moment of potential mastery. You cannot remove it, you cannot ignore it, but you can engage it, study it, learn to operate in spite of it. The difference between a trader who fails and one who thrives is not the absence of fear. We convince ourselves that control is absolute, that rational assessment can eliminate uncertainty, that experience, charts, and carefully drawn lines create a shield against mistakes. We say to ourselves that we are disciplined, that our decisions are based solely on evidence, on probability, on logic. Yet, the illusion of control is seductive because it is comforting, because it allows us to ignore the subtle influence of fear that runs through every assessment, every hesitation, every action. We believe that the mind, armed with analysis and data, is sufficient to navigate the market, yet we fail to account for the silent distortions that fear introduces. It does not announce itself as irrational. It disguises itself as prudence, as strategic caution, as careful planning. And so we hesitate, overanalyze, second-guess, and tell ourselves that it is rational. We look back at missed opportunities, at trades that could have been profitable, and we explain our inaction as strategy, as wisdom, as discipline. The reality is more insidious. We were afraid, and the mind, eager to justify itself, invented reasons that sound rational, convincing even to ourselves. Traders mistake this for control. They mistake their ability to see signals and data for immunity to fear, for the mastery of reason. They think that rational assessment is objective, that it exists outside of emotion, that it can be trusted absolutely. But rational assessment is human. It is conducted by a brain that is constantly reacting, constantly interpreting, constantly influenced by fear and desire. Every pause that feels strategic, every hesitation that feels prudent, every step that feels careful is filtered through emotional biases, through fear that masks itself as reason. The charts do not lie, but the observer does. The numbers are clear, but the interpretation is colored by instinct. You will notice it in moments when logic and action diverge. The signal is correct, the setup ideal, yet you hesitate, overthink, overcomplicate. That is fear speaking through rationalization. You might say you are learning, that you are cautious, that you are preparing for any scenario. Yet what you are really doing is defending yourself against the possibility of loss, against the discomfort of being wrong, against the vulnerability that every trade exposes. The illusion is potent because it feels real. It feels like control. And therein lies the trap. Traders cling to it, believing that if they just wait, analyze, gather more data, they can eliminate uncertainty entirely. They never realize that uncertainty is inseparable from the market, from the human experience, from the act of decision itself. You cannot remove it. You cannot fully control it. The best you can do is recognize it, account for it, and learn to act intentionally in spite of it. When hesitation masquerades as prudence, when overanalysis masquerades as preparation, when caution masquerades as strategy, mistakes are inevitable. Every missed opportunity, every delayed entry, every premature exit is a lesson in humility, a reminder that control is an illusion. You will encounter moments when fear disguises itself as discipline, convincing you that the choice to act is reckless, the choice to wait is wise. In reality, both action and inaction are distorted by perception, by instinct, by the silent chemistry of fear coursing through your system. And yet traders rarely notice. They blame the market, blame the conditions, blame external factors, never looking inward to the true source, their own mind. Rational assessment can be reliable, but only if it is divorced from fear. It requires awareness, honesty, and rigorous self-examination. Without these, the mind constructs a veneer of reason, masking the influence of fear and desire, creating the illusion that one is in control, while in reality, one is captive to instinct. The charts, the analysis, the probabilities, all of these tools are neutral. They do not lie. They do not manipulate, they do not judge. The manipulation comes from within. Traders fail to see this, and the pattern repeats. Hesitation, overanalysis, self-justification, missed opportunity. Each cycle strengthens fear, embeds doubt, and reinforces the illusion that careful analysis equates to control. The paradox is cruel. The more one attempts to control through rational assessment, the more one can be deceived by fear disguised as reason. Yet this is where mastery begins. Not with the charts, not with the trades, not with strategy, but with awareness of the mind's vulnerability to its own instincts. You observe your thoughts, you notice your justifications, you feel the tension between desire and caution, between confidence and doubt. Only then do you begin to separate the rational signal from the emotional noise. The illusion of control begins to dissolve, replaced not by certainty, but by understanding, by clarity, by the ability to act intentionally despite fear. The skill lies not in eliminating doubt, but in recognizing it, measuring it, integrating it into decision-making, and then acting anyway. Most traders never reach this point. They cling to rationality as armor. Fear is not an abstract concept. It is chemical, primal, rooted in the neural pathways older than markets, older than currency, older than trade itself. It manifests before thought, before strategy, before conscious decision. Your body reacts before your mind has the chance to intervene, a flash of instinct that cannot be argued away. The tightening in your chest, the flutter in your stomach, the way your hands shake, these are not signs of weakness. They are signs of the body's ancient alert system, honed over millennia to respond to danger. Yet, the market is not a predator lurking in the bushes. It is indifferent. Your fear is internal, and it operates independently of charts, indicators, or probabilities. Traders often fail to recognize this, dismissing bodily signals as overthinking, as stress, as a lack of preparation. But this is precisely the mistake. Fear is information, raw and unfiltered, and ignoring it is tantamount to ignoring the dashboard on a car while racing down a highway. The human brain cannot shut off fear circuitry. It is automatic, immediate, and relentless. You will feel it spike in the middle of a trend, flare during a volatile candle, whisper when you consider pulling the trigger. Rational assessment is deliberate, slower, demanding attention and analysis, whereas fear is instantaneous, demanding action before analysis can intervene. The tension arises because the two systems are competing: instinct versus intellect, reaction versus reflection. Most traders mistake awareness alone for mastery. They believe that simply noticing fear is sufficient. They check off the mental note, I am aware of my emotions. Yet awareness without practice is impotent. You must dissect it, observe it, quantify it, and act intentionally despite it. The failure to do so results in subtle sabotage. You enter trades too early or too late, exit prematurely, or cling to losing positions, all while telling yourself that you are following the plan. The plan is there, the analysis is sound, yet fear undermines it, hidden beneath layers of rationalization. This is why traders so often ask after a loss, what did I do wrong? They examine charts, review signals, analyze indicators, looking for external causes. Rarely do they look inward to the primal, chemical reaction that dictated their response before logic could assert itself. Understanding fear requires brutal honesty. To name it, to feel it, and to see it in action. You observe how it tightens your chest when a trade moves against you, how it makes your hands linger over the keyboard, how it colors your perception of risk and reward. You notice the subtle distortions, the overestimation of loss, the underestimation of potential, the exaggeration of danger that is often absent in reality. This is the anatomy of fear, an instinctive response that hijacks perception, that manipulates interpretation, that masquerades as reason. And yet, it is not an enemy. It is a teacher. It signals your blind spots, your biases, your vulnerabilities, but only if you are willing to study it without judgment, without avoidance, without excuses. Traders fail when they try to suppress fear, thinking control means absence. Suppression is temporary, a dam that will burst under pressure. Integration is permanent. It is the act of acknowledging the signal, analyzing it, and using it to inform deliberate action. You will feel moments of panic, hesitation, overreaction, and these are the best teachers. They illuminate the precise ways in which your mind is fallible, the exact channels through which instinct interferes with reason. Most traders never reach this level of self-knowledge. They react to fear rather than examine it, allowing it to dictate entries, exits, sizing, and timing. The result is predictable: repeated mistakes, frustration, erosion of confidence. The observer within, the part of you that can watch fear unfold without surrendering to it, is rare, cultivated only through practice, discipline, and reflection. To train it is tedious, uncomfortable, and sometimes humiliating. You confront the racing heart, the queasy stomach, the sweating palms, not by ignoring them, but by engaging with them, by naming them, by measuring their influence on your actions. And in doing so, you create a space between stimulus and response, a gap where rational assessment can operate, uncorrupted by instinct. This is the anatomy of fear, a powerful, ancient, inevitable system that will always exist, but which can be understood, measured, and managed. The mistake most traders make is thinking that they can eliminate it, or that its absence is mastery. The truth is that fear is always present, and mastery is the ability to act despite it. Recognizing it, feeling it, dissecting it, and responding intentionally forms a primal reaction into an instrument of insight. Each tremor in your chest, every impulsive decision fueled by fear comes with a cost far beyond mere capital. Losses are visible, quantifiable, easy to tally, but the deeper cost is hidden. Confidence eroded, perception skewed, judgment compromised. You enter a trade too early because your heart races, exit prematurely because your stomach tightens, over-leverage because your instinct demands action. Each misstep compounds the last, and rational assessment, no matter how carefully constructed, is undermined by the internal storm. Most traders search for external reasons. The market was volatile, the trend misleading, the indicators imperfect. These explanations are comforting, deflecting responsibility from the true source, their own mind. The punishment is internal, intimate, relentless. You replay decisions in your head, dissecting entries and exits, examining whether risk-reward ratios were calculated correctly, whether the signals were strong enough, and all the while you miss the single consistent factor. Fear dictated the response before rational thought had a chance. Recognition is critical. Every misjudgment is an opportunity to see where fear overrode reason, to observe how instinct hijacked your behavior, to identify patterns in your responses that repeat across setups, markets, and conditions. Yet many never reach this level of honesty. They are trapped in a loop of blame, rationalization, and self-deception, and the cost multiplies, not in one trade, but in countless small decisions that erode skill and confidence silently. Traders often misread hesitation as prudence, overreaction as strategy, avoidance as analysis. This misinterpretation is the core of misjudgment. You can see it clearly in hindsight. The trade would have been profitable, the timing would have aligned, the risk was manageable, but your internal state prevented you from executing as planned. That is the tragedy. The market offered opportunity, but the mind refused it. The cost is not just financial, it is psychological. Every mistake fueled by fear reinforces doubt, strengthens bias, and makes future misjudgments more likely. Confidence erodes imperceptibly, replaced by hesitation masquerading as caution, by self-doubt masquerading as analysis. Traders believe that discipline will correct this, that more planning, more charts, more signals will compensate. They are wrong. The cost of misjudgment is cumulative, and ignoring the internal source only deepens the cycle. Rational assessment can mitigate risk, guide entries, and refine strategy, but only when fear is acknowledged, measured, and accounted for. When it is denied, suppressed, or rationalized, it seeps into decisions like a poison, invisible until symptoms appear. Premature exits, late entries, over-leveraged positions, frozen indecision. The market is impartial, the error is internal. And this is where the greatest traders distinguish themselves. They learn to recognize fear as data, to measure its influence, to integrate its signals without surrendering to them. The cost of ignoring it becomes the cost of lost opportunity, the cost of compounded mistakes, the cost of a career undermined by unacknowledged emotion. Traders ask why the market punished them, when in reality, the market was neutral. The punishment was self-inflicted, carried out by the same instincts that had served humans for millennia in real danger, but are maladaptive in trading. This is why awareness alone is insufficient. You must act upon the awareness. Observing fear without integrating it is passive. Understanding it but failing to change behavior is futile. The cost multiplies silently, quietly, insidiously, until cumulative losses, financial, emotional, cognitive, force a confrontation. Each failure is a lesson if you choose to see it. Each lost opportunity is a mirror reflecting the unconscious patterns that dominate your decisions. And yet, most traders never see it this way. They react, adjust superficially, change strategy externally, never confronting the internal driver. The irony is cruel. The more they search externally for solutions, the less effective their actions become, because the root cause, the internal hijacking of rational assessment by fear, remains unexamined. Mastery requires brutal honesty. Rational assessment and fear need not be enemies. They can be guides if only we separate them and confront each honestly. Traders often see fear as an obstacle, something to suppress, to ignore, to overpower with logic, charts, and strategy. They believe that control means the absence of emotion, that mastery is the elimination of hesitation. But the truth is different. Fear is always present. It cannot be removed, and attempts to eradicate it only strengthen its subtle influence. The challenge, then, is to bridge the gap between instinct and intellect, to transform fear from a disruptive force into a source of insight. Pause, journaling, scenario planning, mindfulness. These tools are not mere techniques, they are bridges. They allow you to step outside the immediate reaction, to observe the chemical and emotional response before acting. You begin to notice patterns. How fear escalates during certain market conditions, how past losses amplify hesitation, how overconfidence triggers impulsive action. The key is not to suppress these responses, but to integrate them into your decision-making. You might feel your chest tighten, your hands tremble, your mind race with doubt. Yet this is not a signal to freeze. It is a signal to analyze. Rational assessment must operate in this space of awareness, informed by instinct, but not dictated by it. Traders often mistake suppression for control. They tell themselves, "I cannot allow fear to influence me," and attempt to silence the body's signals. But suppression is temporary. The chemical and emotional response remains, waiting for the next opportunity to disrupt decision-making. Bridging the gap requires honesty, acknowledging fear, mapping its triggers, measuring its influence, and using it to refine rational analysis. When done correctly, fear ceases to be a saboteur and becomes data, a source of insight, a guide to better decisions. Every instinctive reaction carries information about risk perception, probability distortion, and bias. The skilled trader reads it not as a signal to retreat, but as a signal to adjust, to account, to act deliberately. You see your own patterns, how fear manifests in certain setups, amplifies in others, interacts with hope, greed, and past outcomes. You recognize the precise moments when hesitation is warranted and when it is destructive. You measure the intensity, duration, and triggers and translate this into refined, conscious action. This is the bridge, connecting the visceral with the cognitive, the instinctive with the deliberate, with the rational. Without it, rational assessment is incomplete, vulnerable, and prone to being hijacked by the same forces it seeks to control. Traders fail when they ignore the gap, when they act without acknowledging the internal signal, when they over-rely on analysis while denying emotion. Action is then distorted, reactive, inconsistent, and often counterproductive. The gap is subtle, often invisible, and yet it defines every decision. It is the difference between hesitation that protects and hesitation that paralyzes, between action that succeeds and action that fails, between insight and delusion. Mastery is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to operate in the space where fear exists but does not control. The bridge is built through disciplined practice, observing patterns, journaling responses, planning for scenarios, rehearsing reactions, reflecting on outcomes. Each exercise strengthens the observer within, the part of you that can watch fear unfold without surrendering to it. The bridge allows rational assessment to function fully, informed but not corrupted by instinct. You see clearly when to act, when to pause, when to adjust, and when to proceed despite discomfort. The mind becomes calibrated, the body synchronized, and the decision-making process transparent. Traders often underestimate this work, believing that analysis alone is sufficient. Yet every decision distorted. The key to mastering the interplay between fear and rational assessment is cultivating the part of you that observes without reacting, that witnesses without surrendering, that sees fear and reason simultaneously, and allows choice rather than instinct to dictate action. Most traders never develop this observer. They are swept along by momentum, by emotion, by noise, and by the relentless pressure of external stimuli. Their decisions are dictated by the chemical and psychological responses they fail to recognize, by the impulses they mistake for strategy, by the hesitation they call prudence. Training the observer is tedious, uncomfortable, and often humiliating. It requires attention to the minutiae of your reactions, the way your heart races during a volatile candle, the subtle tension in your hands when considering a position, the fleeting thoughts that whisper exit or enter before analysis has even begun. Each signal must be acknowledged, measured, and mapped, not judged or suppressed. You watch your breathing, your posture, your gaze, your heartbeat, your thought patterns, and you begin to notice consistency in how fear and desire manifest. You observe without acting, and in that observation, you create distance between stimulus and response. This space is the laboratory of insight, where instinct and rationality coexist and can be analyzed. Mindfulness, structured routines, journaling, scenario rehearsal, these are not mere tools, they are the scaffolding of the observer. They allow the internal dialogue to unfold with clarity, without interference, without surrender. You notice that certain triggers, prior losses, overconfidence, unexpected volatility, heighten fear's intensity. You record how your reasoning shifts under stress, how hesitation expands into indecision, how panic masquerades as prudence. And in this meticulous documentation, you begin to see the patterns, the anatomy of your own responses, and the ways in which instinct hijacks intellect. Traders who fail at this stage attempt to bypass the discomfort, rushing to action, telling themselves they are experienced enough, that awareness is sufficient. They are wrong. Awareness without practice is impotent. Observation without integration is meaningless. The observer must be exercised repeatedly and deliberately under varying conditions until recognition becomes instinctive and response deliberate. You train yourself to notice the tightening in your chest, the trembling in your hands, and then ask, is this signal of danger or simply the echo of fear? You practice delaying action long enough to see the pattern, to evaluate it, to decide intentionally. Each repetition strengthens the connection between perception and decision, between instinct and action. This is the difference between reactive trading and deliberate trading, between a career dictated by emotion and one informed by insight. The observer does not eliminate fear, it transforms it. It converts raw instinct into data, panic into analysis, hesitation into insight. The difference is subtle but profound. The observer creates a gap where choice can emerge, a space in which the trader can act with clarity and precision, even as fear persists. Most traders never cultivate this part because it is uncomfortable to watch oneself so closely, to confront every impulse, to acknowledge that mistakes, hesitation, and poor judgment are inevitable. But the observer is the bridge to mastery, the mechanism by which rational assessment can operate without interference, the means by which fear becomes a guide rather than a saboteur. You begin to notice the interplay between fear and desire, how greed amplifies hesitation, how hope disguises panic, how prior outcomes distort perception. You observe without judgment, without criticism, and gradually you learn to respond intentionally rather than reactively. This is the essence of training the observer. Repeated, deliberate attention to the internal process of decision-making under pressure. You do not eliminate error, you do not remove fear, you do not create perfect rationality. You create awareness, understanding, and the ability to act with intention despite imperfection. The master trader is not fearless. The master trader does not pretend that hesitation, doubt, or instinctive panic will vanish. The difference lies in the ability to act intentionally in spite of these forces, to acknowledge their presence, measure their influence, and integrate them into decisions without surrendering to them. Fear is ever present, subtle, insistent, a shadow that follows every move, yet the master operates in the space between recognition and action. The threshold of mastery is crossed when hesitation ceases to be paralysis, when doubt is no longer a dictator, when instinct becomes data rather than command. Every trade, every decision, every pause becomes an opportunity to exercise deliberate choice, informed both by rational analysis and the understanding of internal signals. The chest tightens, the heart races, the stomach knots, and the mind whispers warnings. But the master listens without yielding. observes without judgment, and acts with clarity. Each instinctive reaction is acknowledged, not suppressed. Each moment of fear is noted, measured, and used as guidance rather than distortion. The charts remain neutral, the indicators impartial, the market indifferent, yet the internal landscape is mapped, tracked, and understood. Most traders never reach this threshold. They mistake absence of emotion for mastery, thinking that calm equates to skill. They confuse reactive avoidance with deliberate decision-making. They rely on strategy alone while ignoring the subtle influence of primal response. The result is inconsistent action, repeated mistakes, frustration, and a cycle of blame that erodes confidence and skill. Mastery is different. It requires humility, vigilance, and relentless practice. It demands that every impulse be observed, every signal dissected, every pattern studied and understood. It requires repeated confrontation with fear, with doubt, with internal conflict, and deliberate action despite them. The master sees the patterns of past reactions, anticipates the influence of fear in real time, and adjusts decisions accordingly. They recognize triggers, volatility, prior loss, overconfidence, unexpected events, and calibrate responses intentionally rather than reactively. They act with precision, composure, and consistency that is invisible to those still captive to instinct. Rational assessment is reliable not because fear is absent, but because fear is observed, measured, and integrated. The observer within has been trained, the bridge between instinct and intellect has been crossed, and deliberate action becomes the standard rather than the exception. Yet even at this threshold, mastery is not static. Fear continues to arise, doubt persists, uncertainty never ceases. The difference is that these forces are no longer enemies but companions, their presence acknowledged, their influence understood, their signals utilized rather than avoided. Each trade becomes an experiment, each decision a refinement, each moment of pressure a test of integration. Mastery is therefore not perfection, not absence of error, not elimination of fear. It is action in the presence of imperfection, clarity in the midst of uncertainty, deliberate choice in the face of instinctive compulsion. The threshold is crossed when fear is no longer the master, when hesitation no longer dictates outcomes, when the mind observes, interprets, and acts with intention. Traders at this level understand that mistakes, and yet mastery is never final. It is a horizon that recedes as you advance, a path that twists even as you think it straightens. Every trade, every hesitation, every heartbeat carries a lesson waiting to be uncovered, a shadow of insight waiting to be illuminated. You may act with clarity today, deliberate tomorrow, yet the market, the mind, and fear itself continue to evolve, offering new challenges, new triggers, new opportunities for observation and growth. The observer within must remain vigilant. The bridge between instinct and reason must be walked repeatedly, and the integration of fear and rationality must be refined endlessly. There is no endpoint, only thresholds, moments of revelation that pass and invite the next. The silent intruder waits, the anatomy of fear whispers, the illusion of control beckons, and the cost of misjudgment still hovers. But now, armed with insight, awareness, and deliberate action, you step forward not in avoidance, not in denial, but in mastery of your own responses. The journey is perpetual, demanding, and humbling, yet in that very perpetuity lies freedom. The freedom to act consciously, to choose deliberately, to transform fear into insight, hesitation into clarity, and instinct into guidance. And so the story does not end. It expands, evolves, and calls you onward toward new horizons of understanding, skill, and deliberate mastery. Appreciate your time here. These moments are for observing yourself, not the market. A like or subscribe is welcome if you feel it, but don't rush. Keep this awareness with you and let it guide your mind, your emotions, and your decisions.